All right, so it's been about 17 years since Joe Rogan called out Carlos Mencia for stealing jokes, which obviously completely derailed Carlos's career, and he was never able to recover from it. So now that Rogan's comedy is being criticized a lot after his latest special, Carlos is loving it. And just recently, during an interview with Vlad TV, he took the opportunity to call out Rogan for stealing jokes from Brendan Schaub, which is probably one of the worst possible things you can accuse a comedian of. I mean, not only stealing, but stealing from Gringo Poppy. And it's just hilarious now Carlos Mencia is calling Joe out on it. And I'm pretty sure he got this idea from Elephant Graveyard's video. If you remember, he pointed this out.
It would be so much easier if I was just gay as shit.
I wish I was gay. It looks way easier.
We'd like play video games all day. We'd work out. At night, we'd each other.
You're hanging out with only guys. No one can get pregnant.
So, of course, Carlos loved hearing this, and you could tell he's really excited to bring it up during his interview. You know, he can finally try to get some revenge 17 years later and accuse Joe of stealing a joke. But obviously, I don't think most people actually believe Joe stole this. You know, it's just funny enough that he'd even have a joke similar to Brendan's. Like, that's embarrassing enough for him and says a lot about his comedy. You know, because he had been working on this special for 6 years, and he has a joke like this in it. I mean, to make a hacky joke like this, you gotta expect other comedians have done it before, and unfortunately, Schaub is one of them. So it's just bad enough that people can even make the comparison to Schaub. So maybe Joe should have actually watched Gringo Poppy, because then he might have known to take that joke out, because now he has Carlos Mencia calling him out on it.
He also just got accused himself, so.
Oh, he got accused of stealing jokes?
Well, you don't know that?
No.
Pull it up.
I'm about to pull it up.
Oh, seriously? You didn't know about this? I'm sorry to the one to bring it up, bro, but.
Well, the way this is laid out is failed comedian Brendan Schaub takes credit for a line that sounds familiar. Is it Brendan Schaub?
Oh, Brendan Schaub, there it is. But yeah, he got accused of stealing.
Yeah, Joe
Schaub's
Rogan
jokes.
steals Brendan Schaub's joke.
There it is.
Yeah.
So, this is what I didn't want. This is what, like, I thought, I don't want it to become this. You know what I mean? And so now I've had to tell people in my audiences sometimes.
This is the Netflix special.
Yes.
That's the way he did it.
The next special they just did.
that he just did.
So,
Okay.
point being, like, the policeman of this, right? Policeman got caught with his hand in a cookie jar, if that's the case.
Wow.
And my point is that, like, whether what he did or didn't I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not getting involved in it. It's not my thing, but it's just like, this is what you started. This is what we started with all this bullshit. At the end of the day, my biggest fear, so to speak, came true, that this joke stealing stuff is going to be so prolific for everybody that it's going to just become every comedian is going to get accused of stealing jokes. And that's pretty much what's happening right now.
Yeah, and it's so funny he's acting like this is what he's worried about when Joe called him out, like this just opening up the floodgates and causing every comedian to get exposed. But if a comedian is stealing jokes, then they should get exposed for it. I don't see how that's a problem. And then also, maybe if Carlos wasn't stealing a bunch of jokes from a bunch of different comedians, then Joe wouldn't have needed to call him out. So he's also responsible for starting this. And I don't even know what he really started. It's not like it's something that is a giant problem now. You know, he's acting like it's out of control and comedians are getting called out left and right. But I don't see it happen that often. And with social media, it's almost impossible to get away with it. So if you are stealing jokes, you're going to get exposed for it. But still, even with that, you don't really see it happen too much. You know, occasionally, like with the Rogan and Schaub thing here, there'll be a comedian that has a similar joke to another one, but it's usually just a one-time thing, and it's hard to really call somebody a joke thief for just one joke. But with Carlos, it sounded like it was just undeniable what he was doing. And of course, he's going to make it seem like everybody's dealing with this, because then it'll minimize what he did. It'll make it seem like it's not as big of a deal if everybody's getting accused of stealing jokes. And then also to make Rogan sound like the bad guy for calling him out. But again, this isn't a giant problem in comedy. I haven't heard many other people complain about it, other than probably Amy Schumer and her writer. Like, that's probably the closest thing to this. You know, if you remember, she got called out for stealing bits on her TV show. It is a pretty big deal, but it wasn't a career-ending thing for her. You know, it wasn't as bad as what Carlos went through. And I know the situations are different, so it's hard to compare them, but it seemed like Joe was kind of hypocritical when it came to them, because with the Amy Schumer one, he seemed to take it easy on her since he was friends with her. And I think he was kind of just making excuses and saying it was parallel thinking, like just giving her the benefit of the doubt. So he wasn't very consistent with that. But other than that situation and the one with Jay Moore, which both happened probably around 10 years ago, I don't really see that many comedians being called out for stealing jokes to where it's a problem. You know, of course, Mencia's like, it's happening all the time, it's out of control. But I think that's just what he wants, because then it'll make it seem like what he did isn't that big of a deal if everybody's getting called out for it. You know, because still Mencia has trouble accepting responsibility, and he wants to make it seem like Rogan's the big problem here.
Every comedian is pretty much getting accused of this shit. And you know what it's actually doing? It's diminishing what we do. It's diminishing who we are as comedians. It's taking away the power, the beauty, the artistry of what we do. It's turning it into some really shitty, simplistic, oh, this guy can tell that joke. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's not how this works. It's taken me sometimes years to perfect not just the joke, but the joke that I tell before, the joke that I tell right after, the joke in between, like to make the arch, to bring this 45 minutes to 1.5 hours of a beautiful movie. It's not that simple, and I hate that it's gotten there, and I hate that now, because every comedian steals. Now every comedian is a simple joke thief piece of shit, and it has demeaned the art of what we do, and that was my fear.
Yeah, so I don't really know what he's talking about. I mean, it sounds like he's still coping here. I don't think he'll ever get over it. I mean, it's so funny. He's trying to act like this was his big concern the whole time. Like, I was just worried about all these other comedians having to deal with stuff like this. But again, who is dealing with this? You know, I wish he'd give some examples, because he's acting like every comedian is a joke thief. But I'm not sure who he's talking about. I mean, it's been almost 20 years, and still Carlos is basically the most prolific joke thief of all time. So he really set the bar high, and I don't know if we'll ever see somebody as egregious as he was with it. But, you know, it'd be better if he could just admit to his mistakes, accept it, and try to start over. But I don't know if that'll ever happen. And it'd also be interesting if we could see him on Rogan's podcast. I doubt Joe would ever want to do that, but that would definitely make for an interesting podcast. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you want to hear more about Carlos, I actually recently just talked about him on Patreon, because some girl who went to his show claimed afterwards he kept hitting on her and was trying to get her to do Molly with him right in front of her husband. And it's just a crazy story. So if you want to hear about that, or just a ton of other stuff, there are over 90 videos. There's a ton of content. So if you like the channel, you want to help support it, make sure you check it out. Put a link in the description.